Welcome everyone for our conversation on resource development, not just for independent JCRCs. It's a subject I enjoy talking about because I started out proudly thinking that I had the wonderful opportunity to work for a nonprofit where I'd never have to raise money. And about 15, 20 years ago, that changed, and I thought I was going to be yet another nonprofit professional who detested raising resources, and I discovered a thirst for it. And the reason I discovered a thirst for it is because I became aware of what it would enable us to do. And we grew from an organization in San Francisco, understanding we're an independent JCRC, of about 6 to about 25 staff. From a budget of about $1.5 million to a budget of about $3.5–4 million. And this grew out of the Federation saying, you'll just never grow at the rate you need to if you rely solely on our funding. Now, having said that, I recognize that the term resource development means so many different things to different folks. And what I want to suggest in terms of our discussion today is whatever the form of our JCRC, whatever the structure of our JCRC, that what resource development really means is ways to enhance revenue that stretches what we're able to do. So it's not necessarily classic fundraising. It's any ways in which we are able to identify additional sources of revenue that enable us to stretch what we do. So that's how I want us to think of it, because I think that is relevant to every JCRC, not just an independent. So I come here as somebody who was not expecting to spend time in my career doing fundraising, convinced that it would take me away from the day-to-day work that we have to do, and discovering that, in fact, not only wasn't it something that I once started no longer feared, but that it actually made it easier to do the job that I was hired to do. So that's what we're going to talk about today. And what I'd love to do is quickly go around and have everybody identify their name, who you are, your community, and in a phrase, if there's any area where you've done revenue enhancement in your JCRC. And revenue enhancement could mean anything from raising dollars to finding sponsors for a particular initiative that you've undertaken. So why don't we go around, start with Leslie.
Hi, Leslie Anderson, I'm in Atlanta. And I've not been here long enough to go through a round of fundraising, but we are involved in partnering with other Jewish organizations to do a candidate forum this fall. So we're extending our revenues that way by working with other groups and getting their sponsorships as well.
Okay, great. Joe?
Hi, I'm in Palm Beach County, not yet in this position, haven't yet done it. I've done it on behalf of the Federation, but not for JCRC yet, but I fully expect to be doing so.
Okay, great. Howie? I see his name. I don't hear the voice. Lauren?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yep.
Lauren Heron. I am with JCRC AJC in Detroit, and I haven't really done any of that. I mean, I know for an event in November we're looking for partners, but that's about it.
Okay, great. Brandon? Brandon? Cheryl? Cheryl has no mic. She's from Columbia. She said they rely solely on as a line item of the Columbia, Maryland, I assume? Is that Columbia, Maryland? Sorry, I did that before. South Carolina. And Cheryl says they rely on as a line item on the Federation. Also, Howie is trying to get his mic fixed. Michelle. Can you hear us, Michelle? So fundraising item number 1 is new technology for webinars. Okay, where's Michelle from? Can somebody remind me?
Dallas.
Oh, right. Okay, great. Doesn't have a microphone. And then Lauren, your mic?
Lauren
Nope.
spoke already.
Oh, Lauren did. Howie, is your mic working? And it, okay.
There should also have been a phone number on the confirmation, so people should be able to call in by telephone as well if that works.
Great. And Brandon is I don't know if Brandon's phone is working.
I'm in Charleston.
Great. And any fundraising in your capacity?
I've just been making campaign calls for our federation.
Okay, so you're doing it on behalf of Federation, which is also a good experience. Okay, great.
Yeah.
All right, terrific. Well, I hope this will be a useful exercise. My assumption is that if we're in the nonprofit world, at some point or another, we will be asked to do some fundraising, or we will need to do fundraising. And why shouldn't that also include for the JCRC to enhance what we do? So again, I want us to think of it not in terms of going out and just going out and soliciting, you know, a $10,000 donation for your annual JCRC campaign. But I want you to think it in terms of what are the ways in which we can enhance our revenue stream so that we can stretch our program, so that we can stretch what we do. So if we're doing a program and we can bring in corporate sponsors, or we can bring in various kinds of sponsors, or we can have different levels of participation so that some people are also underwriting the cost of people who couldn't attend. All of that is part of resource development. So that's kind of the way I want us to think of it today, in a sort of expansive way, because I think so many JCRCs are from are so thinly resourced that it's very hard to do as much program as you want to do. And we, I think, internalize the notion sometimes that we are not able to fundraise, but that's often because we take a narrow view of what is meant by fundraising. So we're going to try to broaden those boundaries today, and also talk about kind of the mindset as we go into this area. My hope being that everybody, as a result, will feel less uncomfortable with their ability to fundraise. Because at the end of the day, we are advocates. That's what JCRC pros are. We are advocates. And JCRC pros are the best darn advocates out there. And we're so good at advocating for everyone else out there that sometimes we don't really focus as much about advocating for ourselves and what our needs are. And yet we know how great our needs are. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. I just want Melanie and Haya to quickly introduce themselves. And then I'm going to turn it over to Melanie, because Melanie has some great experience coming out of being a director of a JCRC that was a part of its federation, which most JCRCs admittedly are. So Melanie and Haya, introduce thyselves.
Why don't I go first, Melanie, and then you can just go into your segment
Right.
after that.
Okay.
Right.
I'm Haya Luftig. I'm a vice president here at JCPA.
Hi, I'm Melanie Roth-Gorelick, and I'm the senior vice president at JCPA.
Terrific. And Melanie, before you start, I just want to say my hope, and this would be on the assumption that everybody will at least be able to talk by telephone, is that near the end of our session today, we're going to do a quick role play and divide people into groups. So just a heads up on that. Melanie, the floor is yours.
All right, thanks, Doug. So I always like to share what I did when I was a director. I was with Metro West, which is New Jersey, for 10 years. And I was a committee of the Federation, so I technically did not have the ability to do my own fundraising for the Community Relations Committee. However, we did a lot of, we were able to generate a lot of funds to our programs of our CRC, and that was a very good thing for the Community Relations Committee, and it allowed us to have a wider reach into different areas of Federation and the community and to do more. The four main areas that I would recommend is, well, part of the CRC work and is advocating within your federation. Sometimes doing our public affairs work, we're always kind of outward looking, but building an infrastructure within the federation itself to gain support from the YLD and your foundation and your women's philanthropy, and get them excited about the work that you're doing, and also some of the actual advocacy issue areas is really important, because oftentimes they have access to leaders who wouldn't actually come to the CRC but are really interested in what you're doing, but they also may have access to grants where you can partner together. And for me in Metro West, this was the best way to get funding. I received a lot of funding on different projects. So one of the things I suggest is to find out within the foundation that's connected with your federation what family funds exist, and which the staff actually oversee some of the family funds, and which one of them actually may be able to help, where there could be a synergy connection between, let's say, your Israel advocacy work and the interest of the family fund, or voter education and the interest of the family fund. Because that person in the foundation, by bringing you two together, making a shidduch, but is making the family fund happy, giving them a wider, if they fund something that you do, it gives them wider visibility in the federation, and then it helps support your programs. So, for example, in Metro West, we were able to get 3 family funds together to support a college, a Jewish college student Shabbat. And it was an Israel advocacy Shabbat that we ended up doing 6 years in a row. In where we lived, there were a number of universities that didn't have a Hillel, they didn't have a big Jewish student body, but they did have Jews on campus. And so they also were in a campus where they were more vulnerable to anti-Israel happenings because there wasn't a Hillel and other Jewish groups. So this funding allowed us to bring the students together so that they could socialize, and teaching them Israel advocacy and connecting them to the Federation. So we got funding through a Jewish Family Fund for that. And some of those people became great friends of mine, the people in the foundation. The first thing to note when you're working within the foundation, and within the Federation system, and it's the same on communications, which I think we talked about either last time or 2 times ago, is becoming close and engaging with the communications, the chief of communications. Because at first they might not see the important value of getting messaging out about JCRC work. The same might be true for the foundation staff, but over time, as you build relationships and make these connections, you actually could kind of get them also invested in your work and what you want to do, and they can help you do the system. The second part is also looking through working with grant making that the federation or the foundation may be creating. So, for example, Jewish Women's Fund, if you have them, they were very interested in policy. They ended up also funding a number of initiatives we did. They helped launch a human trafficking coalition, which now has turned out to become its own 501c3, but which became a stellar program of our federation. And that was also because when any group within the Federation was doing policy, I was made or had an interest on an issue area, I made sure that, you know, I could be in the room too. And so I could see who was interested, if they can join the CRC, a subcommittee, or if there was a grant I could apply for. And I became a resource, valued resource to them. So when we asked for money, they felt safe that we would do a good job with it. So, and that's the same for women's philanthropy and YLD. They often have funding for things. And so you can look in-house in your federation in all the departments, things like that. You should also be aware of the allocations committees and how your federations are funding different things, how they're funding different agencies, how they're funding, where you fit into the funding scheme. So for example, in Metro West, we were funded as part of operations. There wasn't a separate budget line for the JCRC, but there were separate budget lines for different agencies and also different national organizations or local organizations that weren't federated organizations. And sometimes there were opportunities there to bring some funding to the JCRC. So for example, on Iran, we started funding UANI when it was launched, but some of the funds came through our JCRC because we actually worked with them. So instead of the Federation giving money directly to another organization, we wanted to be the ones to say, yes, they're doing a good job. No, they're not. We're connected with them. And then we were able to kind of increase funding because we said, well, what is our Federation going to do with this organization? And then we wanted some funding to do that as well. So kind of creativity within how the Federation spends its money and seeing you as a valued player of programming and such. And the next thing is when you're doing your coalition work and you're working in common cause, if the coalition is working towards something, and there are a number of different faith groups or different civic leaders on there, and you want to achieve something together, that's very strong validators to go together to local or even national, but foundations. So if there's a foundation in your city, in your state, that wants to give to a cause or gives to social justice issues, gives to policy issues, going together to support your work is a very good likelihood. The other way also is for all of you to pitch in to support whatever the needs or the running of that coalition. There's a cost. But again, I'm going to go back to the I did a human trafficking coalition, and we were able to get funding after our 4th year for a full-time staff person from a New Jersey-based foundation that had nothing to do with the Jewish community. And in doing that, we also created a great relationship between our federation and this foundation, so that then there became a good message about the good work the Jewish community is doing just generally on these issues that others are not aware about, who might also be funding some of the main issues that you may be working on. And the fourth are to ensure a number of national Jewish groups have microgrants on different projects for pilot projects. Sometimes JCPA has had them in the past and IAN, sometimes we haven't, depending on the year. But other groups also have microgrants, from Repair the World to Avodah to others. So to keep, Stand with Israel some years. So it's good to, stay current about funding opportunities that relate to your major initiatives. So just to repeat, those are foundation and federation relationships and funds that already exist within the federation itself through co-sponsoring or enhancing the efforts of a committee, coalition, a family fund. That working with your outside coalition partners to reach out to foundations and others who may support your coalitional work, and possible microgrants that exist at the national level that you could participate in. So that's my advice for you all. If you have any questions, I'm on call for a few more minutes, and I'm happy
Terrific.
to discuss them.
Thanks so much, Melanie. That was great. Who has some questions or comments for Melanie? Anyone? Leslie?
Where would I go to find the information to find like micro grants, or to find out, like, would my local foundation be able to tell me my local funding sources? Like, how do I don't have a problem asking, I just don't know who to ask.
So that's a good question. In terms of, for you, because you're not an agency, you're not in the federation, I think it would be good to just start by building relationships with some of the foundation people. Go out to lunch, go have coffee, learn about what they're due, share your priorities, and just see, plant the seed that, maybe there are opportunities to partner together or to get you in front of a family foundation to do something, and try to get them to provide for you a lay of the land. Depending on how big the foundation is, if there might be multiple people, and sometimes when there are multiple staff people, there could be one person that oversees several family funds that do a lot of funding for the federation. And so that would be the first thing that I would do. And as you plant seeds with them, the foundation people, what you want to do, they'll also remember and try to make connections for you as well. But that's a real relationship building component.
Great. Thanks, Melanie. Joe?
I assume, Melanie, you also spoke to individuals who had particular interests in a project you were working on. I mean, if someone's particularly interested in the BDS, they would fund a program?
Well, yes, but that was trickier because we weren't supposed to really be fundraising from individuals. So then there became the issue of, did they already give to the federation? And then on top of that, were they able to provide for a certain project? So I always found it safer, let's say, to create kind of a proposal. If I was going to go to individuals, right? I mean, it's different if it's just like, can we bring in this speaker? Okay, how we bring in the speaker, everybody pitch in, in your JCRC, or get somebody to underwrite that speaker. If you want to do something more programmatic that you want funding for, it's very good to write a concept paper, 2 pages, no more, and see which of the parts of the federation system you would want to do it with you. So for example, if you were doing something on teens, right, you go to the teen coordinators and get them to buy into you, and then go to your CEO and say, can you help us? Wouldn't this be great for the federation? We could do this together. We've been discussing this. You could do the same with the college stuff, the groups working with the college. If there was a Hillel near you or other Jews that were working on the same campus, get them together in the concept paper, and then you'll find that your CEO or your campaign person will get more excited about supporting you, because then they could show that the organization's doing something bigger than just the JCRC and bring in people who that's a priority for them. If it's just your JCRC members and asking them for funding, that's in-house, your own stuff. But to go outside, you have to be careful. And so that's why it's good if you have the foundation people, or you're working through a grant that a group of people has to decide that you would get the money. It's much safer. But if you're asking to, the other stuff, I would have something written and make it kind of like a great formal, not formal and formal kind of thing.
Great. Thank you. Have any of you had a conversation with the Federation exec that really was around the question of, if you had more money, what would your priorities be? And if so, how have you answered that? And if not, how would you answer it?
I have just a question related to that, Doug, which is, do you make your own budgets, or are you just provided this is what you have for the year.
Great question. Can somebody quickly folks jump in on that?
We get an amount, but then we can decide how it's used. We're allocated an amount, a lump sum, and then we decide how it's allocated.
Great. Others?
Okay, if I can respond to that, then what I would suggest in order to kind of move the envelope is next year, when you know allocations is coming up, to create a budget kind of based on how you used it last year, this current year, but with a vision for what you would actually like to do next year. That would be a request for a little bit more, but not too much more, because it allows you to have a conversation with the allocations people and your CEO, and you never know. So that's a different form of working the system. But, I also used to get a budget. Then I started doing that. It made the world of difference. So I was being proactive, which helped the allocations planning person who had to put together the CRC budget anyway.
And by proactive, you meant we need to increase the budget by X.
Yeah, by putting together. So I understood the Federation sub budget. So
Right.
when they printed out, like, this is the CRC staffing, room, program funds, travel, all of that. I knew what every line meant. I knew what was on each line. And then, so therefore I was on equal par to them when they were creating the budget. And then I would make my own shadow budget, and I would go to the shadow with the shadow budget to the allocations, to the staff person who was creating the allocations budget, to go through what I thought I needed for the following year. Because sometimes the federations decide what a CRC needs, but the CRC should decide what the CRC needs.
Right.
And then be a negotiation. And
Right.
then you might have to, pitch it to someone, but at least you get the planning person to understand what you want and how you plan to use the funding to meet your next year's goals.
Great. Terrific. I see we've been joined by Amanda from Phoenix. Welcome. And Melanie, I would suggest those. I think there were 4 points. I'm not sure. But if you could write those up very briefly, we could send those out, as part of the follow-up for this group.
My pleasure. And if anyone ever wants to follow up personally via email, or if you have questions while you're in the midst of doing these efforts, please feel free to reach out to me.
Terrific. Thanks,
Doug. I have to go, but
all right. Thanks so much, Melanie. So I wanna sort of move the discussion along, but I wanna reinstate something I said at the outset, and that is that we are first and foremost advocates in our field. We advocate for the public affairs agenda of the organized Jewish community, predominantly in the external arena. And I guess my wish is that we will become equally adamant advocates for our own needs within the system, within the community. And I think part of that is just training our own mindset. So I encourage everybody on the call to think in terms of, if I had additional resources, here are the 5 things that I could do with additional resources, and then put them in some kind of priority order. It's to create a literacy coalition. It's to take non-Jewish leaders to Israel. It's to hire a full-time additional staff member. It's to organize a major coalition. It's to do a multi-faith Seder. It's to, you name it, whatever it is. But I think to have that, and then begin to build that into your conversations with the Federation about, in order to make sure that JCRC continues to have the maximum impact, to strengthen our role in the community. Here's what we need to be, here's what we need to be doing, and put a dollar estimate on what it would cost to do that. And then you can problem solve. How much of this, could come from Could some of this come from the Federation annual campaign? If not, are there grants we could go for? If not, can we think about corporate sponsors? How can we work together to achieve this result? Rather than being fatalistic in a way about saying there's not additional money to be around. Because you all know in the communities that you're in that federations sometimes go through lean times and they sometimes go through growth periods. And in those growth periods, there are many entities that are benefiting from increased resources to do their work. And that should not, JCRC should not be last in line. Our work is way too important for it to be last in line. So if there's anything I guess I want to do is instill the self-confidence that just as we're asking public officials to support a particular piece of legislation or asking interfaith or intergroup partners not to join the BDS movement or we're doing anything else, we should be able to ask for $50,000 additional dollars, $10,000 additional dollars for some project that we're really wanting to do in our community, understanding that that's going to vary dramatically community from community. So in order to get there, I wanted to have us spend a little time looking at tips for being a successful fundraiser. I want to start by putting on the screen the article that we sent out in advance, because I'm not sure if everyone had a chance to look at it. And I actually love this. You know, I always try to send some stimulating article in advance, but I actually love this piece because it's from the vantage point of, it's coming up, do you hate asking for money? Here's a new way to look for fundraising. And if you scroll, you know, we'll scroll down quickly, but it starts with how you embrace your fear. And my main point is none of us has a fear in going into a public official, a university president, a top community leader, and advocating for the positions that the JCRC and the community care about. Nor should we have fear when we are asking for money. And I thought, you know, what this had as advice was just terrific. Reframing your attitude. Number one, in italics, I'm not bothering anyone by asking them for money. Somewhere down the line it says, this is not the donor's first rodeo. This is not the first time they've been approached for money. And I love that it says you're not selling a product, a vacation, or a piece of art. You're in the business of making a difference. You want to engage people to take that ride with us. As you go down, it talks about shaking those nerves. It says that here's what that goes along with that. Fall well and fall often. If you're not being rejected, you're not asking enough. Love that. Be a proud advocate. We talked about that. Also, number 3 is critically important. There are perks for you. Fundraising is all about building relationships. You know, I use as an example that until we were doing fundraising at our JCRC, I had never really sat down with the head of a top Fortune 100 company who's the CEO in San Francisco, international company, deeply involved in the community and the federation, but I'd never really had reason to sit down with him one-on-one. He became a significant donor, but more importantly, I got to hear from him how he saw the landscape, how he saw the issues that we worked on, and he became an advocate for us. And, you know, one of my favorite quotes is, he was very active with a group of conservative Republicans, and occasionally you would hear some pushback about the work of JCRC, our involvement in some issue, that was conceived, that was viewed as being on the liberal side of the ledger. And this man told me that he said to one of the most influential in his small group, said, you know, the JCRC gets more done in one day than the Republican Jewish Coalition gets done in 1 year. I could never say that, but he could, whether or not he ever gave us money. So I think that the notion that it's not just about the fundraising is critically important. Indeed, I have to say, when I go out and have lunch with somebody, the time we spend on talking about money or contributions is 5 to 10 minutes out of an hour, hour and a half lunch. The rest of the time, we're talking about what we always talk about at JCRC, and we're doing what we always do at JCRC, and that's relationship building. Don't judge those who can't give. Find the good. Even when a meeting bombs, you may learn something that will be helpful to JCRC. As I said, this is not the donor's first rodeo. This is your job. And most importantly, you're giving people the ability to make a difference. So I really wanted to call this out because I think it's an exceptionally well done piece that really speaks to the reluctant fundraiser. And I think in JCRC, we tend to be historically the reluctant fundraisers. So I want to encourage you to fully absorb that piece. And then in San Francisco, there is a director of development at the JCRC, and I asked him, John Feldman, who's been with us now, I'd say 7 or 8 years, to put together a short cheat sheet that Haya will send out afterwards, but we'll put it up on the screen right now. And this is more for conventional fundraising. So the first piece that I sent out sort of reinforces what Melanie said, which is not all about conventional fundraising. It's any ways in which we are going to focus on raising more money or finding more resources for JCRC. And here's John's excellent list of fundraising suggestions. Ask, inspire and engage the board of directors. Can't only be you. Develop a philanthropic culture inside the organization. Have your ED or most senior staff member provide leadership in this area. Be strategic and use a diverse set of fundraising approaches that are a fit for the local community. Regularly, and that could include face-to-face, phone, email, direct mail, e-solicitations, and fundraising events. Regularly share updates with the organization's supporters and key stakeholders about JCRC's impact in the community and successes. Many of you participated in the session. We talked about how to position the JCRC so that it's seen for its value. That is a necessary prerequisite to smoothing the ground, to softening the ground, where you can ultimately build support, additional financial support for JCRC. Make it easy as possible for supporters to donate online. Use a donor database to track and capture key information. Engage outside consultants to help develop your fundraising or development program where there's good potential return on the investment. And yet again, ask. Be sure to meaningfully thank and cultivate your donors. I did this quickly because I realized that this is much more applicable in a classic fundraising model. But I think, again, there are elements here that can be useful and adaptable in the arena in which most JCRCs find themselves, which is where they're not doing direct fundraising. But the language of fundraising, getting the feel for going in even to your campaign staff, to the heads of allocations, to the exec at the Federation, and talking in the way that you would about the need to increase your financial resources is something that simply everyone has to get more comfortable with. The real world is that we're in a competitive environment. That's the real world. The reason I mentioned that this goes hand in hand with what we did a week or two ago around how to really get out from behind the scenes and make sure the key leadership is aware of what the JCRC is doing, is because you need advocates. You need advocates not just to hold the line, but you need advocates to move forward in terms of additional resources. Now, there may be something that, there may be some other pieces that we could bring to bear, and if you have individual circumstances, you should let us know. But these are overarching ideas for, I think, how to bring in a kind of comfort level of talking about the fact that you need dollars. Again, this is taking the advocacy skills that you already possess as JCRC pros and applying those advocacy skills in the same way that every other organization out there goes out and makes sure that it has the resources necessary to do the job. The last thing you want to be is in the position where your JCRC is expected, the demands on the JCRC far outstrip the resources that you have. And, you know, that notion about rejection is important. You may not get an increase from the Federation next year, but you may get one the year after, and you're going to sharpen your ability to make that case even more going down the line. So I want to stop for a second. I see Michael Benish from the San Francisco JCRC, who works on resource development, has joined us. Welcome, Michael. And see if there are any questions at all about the various tips that we've shared on fundraising. So let me pose this question. How do you think what we're talking about today could be applicable in your environment? Somebody?
Can you repeat the question? Sorry.
How do you think what we're talking about today in terms of tips for expanding our resources or resource development could be applicable in your JCRC environment?
I think personally, I think it's the same. You know, it's the conversations you have with people, and the fact is we have access to a lot of people because of what we do, and I think what we do involves a lot of areas of passion for people. So I think the same rules apply. It's just the same. It's the conversations.
Great.
Listening, and then I think, as you say, bringing the JCRC into the Federation awareness realm and opportunities for raising money there is crucial with one's colleagues.
Okay, good. Good. Others? So I want to encourage you to take time again to review the two sets of tips, the one that we sent out in advance, the one from today, and to try to try to break out of the mindset of we're that organization that doesn't have to raise money. Others are doing it on our behalf. Because unless we're also advocating for additional resources, we're never going to have the ability to do everything that we really think we should be able to do. And again, we're not talking about just going to donors. We're not talking just about an increase in the Federation's allocation. We're not talking just about grants. We're not talking just about co-sponsorships or corporate sponsorships or any other thing. We're talking about the elasticity of having all of these at our disposal. And in order to think about what's the best way to gain those resources, the first thing we need is to identify what are our priority needs. Where do we need to grow? It could be that it's staff. It could be that it's a particular major program that you want to do. So I want to try this. I hope everybody at least is on microphone at this point, and we're gonna try this. So we're gonna break up into twos, and we're going to, right, Haya? We can do that, right?
Sure. You want two per group?
Two per group.
Okay.
And here's the assignment for the next 15 minutes. So until like 1:02 p.m., you will be in your groups, and each of you will have an opportunity to try to convince the other to support a particular program. And that particular program is you have always wanted to have the opportunity to take non-Jewish leaders to Israel, like major community leaders, African American, Latino, religious leaders, university officials, and you want to take 10 on your first ever trip to Israel of non-Jewish leaders. And the Federation exec says, I support the program. We don't have money for it, but I'll tell you what, there are 3 very substantial philanthropists in the community who don't give to the Federation, but they might be interested in this. You have my permission to go and talk to all 3 of them and convince them that they should support this program. A week-long study tour in Israel for non-Jewish leaders who will then come back. There will be a reunion. You'll have an opportunity to show them, kind of a real picture of Israel. and this is something that excites you. And you're going to each of these donors and asking each of them for $25,000. And the Federation exec says, if you raise that money, then I will find the rest for your trip. All right? So one of you is going to be the JCRC exec trying to raise the $25,000 from the individual. The other is the individual who you're meeting for the first time, doesn't even know about JCRC, wants to hear a little bit about JCRC, wants to know why is this a program that they should support. Does everybody understand the assignment? So kind of like 5-ish minutes for person one, then, and back and forth. It doesn't have to be a monologue. The person who's in the position of being asked to give the money should, push back, should say, wow, that's not only so great, I'm going to double it. Whatever role you want to take on for that purpose, and then flip roles so that the person who was the prospective donor now becomes the JCRC exec, and the other person becomes the prospective donor. We'll come back in now 12 minutes, and we'll share our experience briefly. So let's do this and see how it goes. Welcome back, everyone. Everybody can unmute for now. What you learned from doing that short exercise?
Well, it's a little bit hard because you're missing out on the extended conversation.
Of course.
That you would have with the person and honing in on their real passion. So while Lauren and I did a great job because I got $1 million for this.
Nice.
I'm very giving.
Love it.
Erect a statue in her honor. But I was trying to get my points in where I normally would wait for her to really converse and give her passionate, responses and talk more about, so.
Okay, good. Others? Leslie?
Wow, I need to work on my elevator speech.
Say it again.
I need to work on my elevator speech a bit. I did also find it hard not being like in front of somebody. I realized that I rely a lot on nonverbal cues when conversing or when trying to present something. And I also realized that when I went into it, I wasn't sure who my audience was. So knowing something about the person across from me is going to impact how I communicate what I want to do.
Right.
So, and when I started my elevator speech, I went, I'm kind of rambling because I don't know who I'm talking to, so for me, that's a good prep thing to remember.
Great. All right. These are all terrific insights. Amanda?
I'm fairly new at the asking for money, so I got over my fear, I think, and just going for it. When I started talking, I realized I can do this. I can, if I just go with what I know and use passion and explain why and make the ask. I really appreciate in the article about expecting to fail. You're going to fail some of the time, but put it out there, and if it works, then I'll be thrilled. And so just kind of went for it. And I know in the future, when I really do it, I'd have more information to prepare, which would be helpful for me. I like to be prepared about the person, about the program. I like the way Brandon mentioned that he was going to do a breakdown of the expenses and the impact that it had in other communities. So I think those pieces of information are helpful for donors. They don't want to just hear your speech. They do, but they want more follow-up. So I feel like it went well.
Great. Terrific. Brandon? Can Brandon talk?
Great. I'm sorry. Am I muted?
Now you're not.
Okay, great. Yeah, it was a really interesting experience. I haven't had a pitch meeting like that. I could definitely see doing it though if I had a well-researched pitch to make. I think it would be something I would be comfortable doing. It was really interesting. I didn't think I would be.
Great. Terrific. Excellent. Who did I call on? Michelle, who I was paired with?
Yes, can you hear me?
I can.
Okay. So yeah, I found one challenge was kind of when you turned on me to be the donor perspective, I find that I'm so much focused on the JCRC perspective and of obviously, serving and being a JCRC professional. But I did learn very well on understanding, who I'm speaking to and finding the donors' interests, and especially if we're focused on local issues, really making sure to understand fully, local politics or local issues that may influence the ask to our benefit of the JCRC.
Great. Okay, excellent. Lauren?
Yes. Yeah, I think from what I got from it, it was really looking at how, I guess it's just going to be a very individual experience because you want to connect with that particular person in a way to really make them want to talk about themselves and their experiences. So, I didn't really get a chance to do mine, but I think seeing it from the other perspective was really about what's going to tug at their heartstrings.
Great. Great. Michael, welcome.
Thanks, Doug. Sorry for being late. It was interesting to come from the perspective of already having the program in place. And I don't really do the fundraising around the Israel trips, so it was good practice. And it was also good to share kind of insights from how we go to our donors who have a range of political perspectives and talk about how you can kind of tailor your ask about the same program to people on the left and people on the right.
Okay, great. Terrific. Aya, were you in a group? You were not in a group. Okay, I think I covered everybody. This was fairly short, but your insights are really so on target. And I think you can just see, you basically said even in that short exercise, you felt more comfortable as a result of doing it. Imagine if you did that with, more practice, how much more comfortable you'd be. And again, I understand that some of you will not be in the position. Some are. I think Atlanta and Phoenix are expected to raise money for their JCRCs. So we have a mix on the phone today. And of course, San Francisco. So right now it's kind of divided. But there are also those of you who won't be doing kind of pure asks. And yet it's still the mindset of getting over any fear around money for JCRC, particularly given the fact that we don't exhibit fear when we're advocating passionately on any number of issues on behalf of the community. We also shouldn't feel it here. A few things I just want to pick up on. One is, and obviously this was too short a conversation for this purpose, but I will say from my own self-reflection, I find that it's important sometimes to slow down and to make sure that it's a conversation, not just a pitch, that it's really a conversation. And, there are times where I'll come back from a solicitation and I'll just, reflect on it and say, I didn't really engage that person as much as I could have in conversation. What's really making that person tick? What's the next thing that person cares most about? So that's one thing I wanted to emphasize. The second thing is research. We didn't talk too much about it today, but if you're in the position where you're going to somebody and asking them to support program X, finding out what kinds of, what's the dollar range they typically give, what's the capacity, what are the areas that they're involved in, and being able to show to that person, that something about them. Everybody has some kind of ego in a way, and just being able to acknowledge that you are aware of what contributions, not just financial, this person has made in the community can be very important, I think, as well. In addition, one thing I think I have often discovered is that you go into that conversation for a solicitation, but are nervous about putting the dollar amount out there. So you just wait and wait and wait. And then you get to the point of the meeting where that person says, I've got to go now. And then you're in that awkward situation, say, oh, one more thing, could you give us $25,000 for X? And what I wanted to suggest is it shouldn't be the first thing out of your mouth, but it should also not wait until you feel like you're at the point where the meeting may be winding down. And it should begin to come naturally. We are raising money for a remarkably important trip whose bang for the buck impact has been demonstrated to be tremendous all over the country. It's particularly important now in our community because of such and such. Ultimately, we need to raise $100,000. The way in which we're approaching this is we're asking several individuals who we know we care deeply to give us $25,000, including you. And your lead gift on this would make such a difference. But if you wait until the end of the meeting, it gets harder and harder. And it's human nature, if you are, new at this, to want to wait, because everything else, it's just a conversation. The only thing that changes it is that there's a dollar amount attached to it. So my advice is to not wait, but figure out in advance kind of where you're going to bring that into the conversation. And I think that's really important. And obviously you go in with that this is a given, but if the person says, I wish I could give you $25,000, I'm just not there yet. I'm prepared to give $5,000. Then, that disappointment that you feel, you kind of have to hide a little bit and be gracious and say thank you for your generous support, because you are building a relationship. And that's the other key thing here. This should not be, particularly if somebody is responsive, this should not be a one-time engagement. This is an opportunity to build a relationship. And if it's $5,000 now, and you keep in touch with that donor, and that communication is sustained, and you're able to demonstrate how that money was used in a way that redounds to the benefit of the community, then the potential is greater there as well. So what I, at the end of the day, really want to reinforce is this is about the same kinds of conversations that you can do in your sleep. The only difference is that somewhere in that hour conversation, 30-minute conversation, there's going to be 5 minutes about how much something's going to cost. And you're talking to people who, I love the comment that said this is not their first rodeo. It may be yours, but it's not their first rodeo. They have been asked many, many times to give. They'll pick up on your nervousness if this is fairly new. That's okay. They're not there to, to make it more difficult, but they're also not there to, the donor's not there to make it a slam dunk either. You really obviously have to make the case. And that brings me to my final point, which is we are constantly scoring victories in our advocacy efforts, and we can be effective in this area as well. And the same kinds of conversations I'm talking about that one would have with an individual donor really apply when we're sitting down with the Federation exec or the allocations team or the others, in terms of it being at the relationship building phase, but also knowing what your top priorities are and why that money is going to be giving you the kind of bang for the buck that'll really make a difference. So I hope this has been helpful. I'm always eager to hear, what the applicability of any of these discussions are as you go forward. Happy to continue offline. And in the meantime, I do want to say our 10th and last session is next Tuesday, which is on board professional relationships. Learn how to build the most effective working relationships with your lay leaders. So looking forward to that. We've talked before about identifying and nurturing lay leaders. This is sort of a continuation of that conversation. So thanks everybody so much. You all did a great job, and I'm very excited to see what you do with it. All the best.